ones where it doesn't make sense for it to go. And then, as Pete was mentioning a bit as well, Reimagine Plainfield is strongly tied to this as well. So that was a plan that took place that has developed lots of goals for revitalizing the corridor, those access management components, and bringing new life and economic vitality and resilience to the area. So that was a key guiding theme in this update as well. So I'm not going to read all of these, but just in general, we did a survey back in February, March of 2023. We had about 700 people that participated in going through the survey. And this was a way that we developed some of our guiding themes and our vision statement that you'll see on the next slide. So people really want to see unique family-owned restaurants that come in. So building on that kind of economic diversity and resiliency. There was support shown for housing and retail variety. Nature and recreation really came through heavily as well, as this is kind of an oasis amongst more densely developed areas. So yeah, keeping this a place that has diversity in housing, diversity in economic options and retail, and keeping nature and recreation as a guiding component of the area. So finding a balance between all of those. So as I mentioned, these are our vision and guiding themes that we've developed based on reviewing those survey results and just work sessions of looking at the data and reading the kind of key things about the township. So the vision statement that we've established that we reviewed with the public at our open house was Plainfield Township will be a well-balanced, connected, and vibrant community that is consistently resilient to changing conditions and intentionally accounts for the needs of its natural environment and population as a whole. So within that, we have these 4 key themes that we want to have ingrained in the decisions that we make and development that takes shape. So I know it's a little hard to see on here, but the 4 are grow, adapt, thrive, and balance. So those speak a lot to those initial themes that I talked about as well, where we want to retain and attract households, businesses, and jobs. And we wanted to facilitate development that allows for a variety of different housing types and land uses that optimizes the infrastructure. So taking a look at the utilities and their extensions and looking where development makes sense. For adapt, we want to have communities that continuously evolve. So the future is ever changing, and we want the township to be able to grow with that and maintain its strengths while working towards the future as well. So having those walkable, vibrant, adaptable places. Thrive speaks to the resiliency of having different housing types, increasing the economic vibrancy, diversity, and building up the corridor so that we have a place that people want to stay and their families come back to. And then balance, this one kind of rings true throughout all of the things that we've proposed in the plan of making sure that we have nature and development happening where it makes sense, preserving what we have, but infilling with ways that we can help address housing needs that need to take place in the right way for the township. So making sure that we keep that balance of the township and highlight the things that people really love about the area while bringing in things that will support it as well. So as we get into our future land use plan, I just wanted to bring this up quickly again as well. So this takes a look at zoning districts versus future land use categories. So on our future land use map that you'll see coming up here, these are all categories that will guide the development of different areas. And the zoning districts are what you see on the map as it exists now. So those are the things that regulate what can be put there, where it can go, kind of the nitty-gritty of it. And then the future land uses are advisory, and they're used as a guide for the future. So if someone comes in and says that they would like to kind of transition the land into a different use, we check back with our future land use map to make sure that that's what's intended for the township based on the work that we've done. So an overview of how the future land use categories have been revised and why we did so. I just wanted to run through this here. So similar again to a lot of what I've been saying, we wanted to address the valuable existing natural areas that exist in the township. So we've highlighted parks and open space as its own category, just to call out those areas where parks exist, and we want to make sure they're preserved and celebrated too by having kind of more connection and activation that brings people to those natural spaces. We have developed some more mixed use categories. So these are commercial uses where they would allow for kind of more of a range because we want places to be adaptable and encourage walkability. So we've identified areas where it makes sense for that to take place. And there's 3 different categories because it'll happen at different scales. So we have kind of our larger ones along the Plainfield corridor, but then some more neighborhood, smaller scale options mixed without the township as well. And then overall too, we've condensed the categories a little bit just to kind of encourage to simplify it a bit and make it really clear, because a master plan is most effective when it can be utilized by everybody and it's easy to make decisions. So we wanted to really highlight that and set a new tone for having a vibrant, mixed use, but naturally preserved future for the township. So that's an overview of how we are thinking behind how we developed the future land use categories. Another thing I wanted to highlight too is the floodplain has been something that we've wanted to pay a lot of attention to as well. So we've developed natural feature maps and have kept that into consideration when we've been coming up with these different categories here, because we want the natural features to guide the area's built environment. And there's been support from residents about the township making sure this is a priority in their development decisions and approval decisions that they make. And we want to make sure that that continues to happen, because we do know the floodplain is very important to take into account with development in the township. Another thing that really influenced some of our housing decisions was taking a look at Plainfield's housing stock versus the housing composition. So the housing stock are the kinds of houses that we have available, and then the housing composition are who are the people that are living in these places. So as you can see in Plainfield, 75% of these houses are one unit detached, so that's just kind of a single home, and then the one unit attached would be townhomes, so connected, separate facilities. And then we have our 2-unit, 3-unit, and then all the way up to apartments and mobile homes. So we can see here that a large percentage is just the one unit detached, and we're missing those duplex or triplex kind of middle options that account for a large portion of the population, especially when we look at the housing composition in comparison to that. So it's primarily made up of married couples, either with kids or without kids, primarily without kids, and the persons per household for Plainfield Township is about 2.53. So in looking at how many people we have living here and then looking at how the different housing types are made up, we can see that there is a need for this middle portion here. So finding ways that we can infill and support those while keeping the character of the township and supporting the housing stock here, but bringing in options that will make sure that everybody has a place where they can choose to live, for people working here or students, younger people, first-time home buyers that maybe can't afford that one unit detached or looking for a smaller way to live. So these are our proposed future land use categories. So I broke them up into 3 different sections just to kind of organize them a bit, since we have quite a few. But we have natural, residential, and service areas. So in natural, that's our parks and open space, and then our country residential, which is similar to our kind of rural preserve type housing, where it's really in alignment with the natural features. So maybe there's hills that we're working with, or we're keeping it on larger lots and just more of that rural character feel. And then in residential, we have 4 different categories essentially. So we have that country residential that I mentioned, suburban residential, which are kind of just typical neighborhoods that we see here, maybe on a private drive, primarily single family homes, but opportunity for accessory dwelling units and different uses to be on those as well, keeping character with neighborhoods as they exist. And then neighborhood residential is where we see opportunity to open up a little bit and do that infill housing development that I've been talking about. So maybe bringing in some of those middle options where people don't have to live in an apartment, but don't have to do a single family home. So opportunities where there's the infrastructure to support some additional housing and increase walkability in the area with that. And that goes into the mixed use areas as well. That would allow for some live work units, so people could maybe run a shop and then have an apartment above that, or filling in some of those multi-unit houses that fit in that kind of 2 to 8 category range as well. And then our services, these are kind of your commercial or support areas that you would think of. So as I mentioned, we have the 3 different mixed use areas. So the town centers are those busier ones tied by the Meijer, the Lowe's, things of that sort that there's heavy traffic going in and out. Core connectors are what exists between those. So they're a bit more, they connect the town centers, but they're still busier kind of restaurants, services use. And then the neighborhood centers are those smaller scale ones that are kind of pocketed throughout that people can walk to from their neighborhood. Maybe it's a corner store, just small local support services that exist geared towards neighborhoods to increase walkability. And then office park and flexible industrial. These ones are kind of areas where we'll see some of those administrative offices, but we wanted to really keep these areas adaptable. So that's why you see the flexibility encouraged, that it's not going to be kind of typical, and there's opportunity for these places to evolve into different uses going forward to make sure that they're resilient and adaptable, but places that are nicely buffered and kept for some of these other uses that aren't as traffic building as retail and housing and things of that sort. So again, I know it's hard to probably see all the details from your seats here, but this is the future land use map. So it calls out all of those different categories that I walked through previously, and some of these sub areas that we've identified that have some just kind of unique characteristics that we've identified for in the draft plan. One change that has happened to this map since we last met was the northeast corner of West River and Jupiter has changed from neighborhood residential to suburban residential. So we had some members from the public voice that they would like to see that stay suburban residential, and after hearing their comments, we were able to revise that to account for the feedback received there. So that was a change that I wanted to call out here. And yeah, just share this map again with everybody here. So the next portion that we wanted to discuss is the Harrington and 10 Mile portion of the future land use map. So we know there's been discussion about that, so we wanted to open up a chance to talk about that here at the meeting today. So first things, we wanted to kind of just lay out some details about the area as it exists now and as we are proposing it to take shape in the future. So as you're aware, we've identified this location to be flexible industrial is what its master planned future land use category would be. And there was intent behind this because we've identified this as kind of a use that generates less traffic congestion and really speaks to that goal of economic resiliency, especially based on the different uses that would be allowed in here. So I wanted to share those uses. I know it's a long list, so I'm gonna read out some of them as well, but just to give you a feel for what this would align with in terms of the zoning ordinance that would be regulating the uses here. This would fall into the light industrial category. So that's the least intense and most flexible industrial use within the zoning ordinance. And in here, I wanted to share the uses just so everybody knows what they are, and then we'll take a look in comparison to different options for the area. So within the light industrial use zoning category, we allow for breweries, distilleries, catering establishments, contractors' offices and showrooms, data processing centers, emergency medical service facilities, equipment rental services, financial institutions without drive-ins, governmental or public utility buildings, health clubs or gyms, labs and technology centers, manufacturing, processing, or assembling facilities, light mini warehouses and self-storage facilities, parks, professional offices, radio and television, testing facilities, retail businesses, schools, warehousing, distribution centers. So it is a wider range. I think at first glance, we all picture a certain thing when we hear industrial, so I did want to share that we did have intention behind this, that we want to include uses that support the community area and don't cause any negative impacts to as it exists now. So I did want to share that this would be light industrial uses and just give you a glimpse at what those might look like, but we want to talk through it more as well. And on our next slide here, we look at some of our different options here. So this will be something that, especially when the public hearing opens, we can talk about this more, but we want to address feedback and talk through it. So we have these kind of three different options based on some of our initial discussions. And these would be either to keep the proposed future land use as it is. So after we kind of talk through it and look at it a bit more, this area would remain flexible industrial. Or the other option would be that we could take it back to the 2017 plan, that is mixed use and rural preserve. Mixed use does allow for a lot of similar uses that would be present in the industrial. That's why we gave it the flexibility and adaptability was kind of a key goal. So that's something that is still true for the industrial. So that's a similarity between the two. Or we've come up with a hybrid of these two options where we would keep that flexible industrial use to the north, where there's already some higher intensity commercial uses that are allowed to happen, and then revert this bottom portion back to the rural preserve from the 2017 plan. So I'll bring these back up when we're talking, but these are our initial kind of options that we've presented here. And then our next slide here, so this takes a look at how this property is currently zoned. So this is how it's regulated to be used currently. So that top portion is C5 commercial, and then we have R1C residential below that. So again, I wanted to share the uses as they exist now. And on the next slide, we kind of compare the two. So in C5, there's bars and, oh, okay, so yeah, so this one here breaks down the current zoning of this area. And then this will just, I'll go back to the other slide to look at those residential uses as well. But in looking at C5 compared to the flexible industrial, and flexible industrial specifically would be our light industrial zoning district, we have the similarity of artisan food and beverage production facilities, bars and taverns, breweries and distilleries. So we have kind of that food, retail, professional offices, and parks category. And then we go into some different uses. So we have live entertainment, temporary structures and uses, and 24-hour operations for C5. And then flexible industrial, we have data processing centers, emergency medical facilities, radio and television studios, research, development and testing facilities, schools, trades, vocational. So those are kind of more of they differ a bit there. And then we also have government or public utility buildings allowed within both of these categories. C5 allows for hotels and motels, while light industrial allows for health clubs and gyms. And then another distinction here is that the C5 allows for the drive-in or drive-through services. This is obviously up along 10 Mile, but the flexible industrial does not allow for those drive-in type services. And then another similarity we see are those mini warehouses or self-storage facilities are allowed in both zones. Flexible industrial would allow for some lab and technology centers, light manufacturing, assembly facilities, and then wireless communication facilities are a similarity between the two. Let me see if I can go back here, actually.
So the big difference there is that right now your zoning along 10 Mile allows drive-through restaurants, like 24-hour uses, pretty intense uses. And that's what you currently allow today through zoning. For the future land use for flexible industrial, we're saying, let's not do that. Let's not do that. You already have that on the other side. We've heard from the public. They don't want that. So let's not do that. And instead, and not do auto-oriented gas stations and things like that. Let's do something that still generates good tax revenue and provides you with jobs when you're right at the interchange. So think about other things that can be light industrial in nature. And a lot of them are, they're practically office uses in a lot of cases with white rooms and other things. So switching it's still economically producing, but it's different in its type and intensity. As Sarah mentioned, the goal was to try to shift some of that and look at what you have and where it is. And so that's the big change with flexible industrial is it gives you a range of uses, but it takes away some of that more auto-oriented, intense commercial retail activity that you have that's currently allowed today on that side of the highway.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Who is this person who's talking?
This is Suzanne Schultz. She's part of the planning team here that's helped with this plan update. She's the project manager of it. Yeah. So as I said, we'll come back to that. Last thing I wanted to touch on is that this plan will be revised into its final version and then sent to the Township Board for adoption there. And then from there, zoning amendments and access management planning would take place. So as I said, the master plan informs the zoning, so we would do updates to reflect the intent that's displayed in the master plan. And then access management will be a key planning element coming forward where we can have a plan to revert back to when we have properties coming in for development proposals, that we can have clear, concise guidelines for what we want access management and driveways and just the flow of traffic on major roads to look like. So I wanted to note that those will be two key implementation steps that you would see take shape after the plan is adopted. So there's many more, but those are the two most prominent ones that we would see take shape first. So
And Sarah, do you want to talk about how it doesn't necessarily mean automatically zoning changes, but like the planning commission has the discretion over time
correct.
to whether they proactively or reactively want to change something?
Yes. Do you maybe want to speak to that a little bit more?
Okay.
I think you know that more clearly.
So, you know, you have the future land use map that's 20 years out. So you may say, like, maybe like Belmont area, we said, you know, maybe it should be a neighborhood center and there should be other things that happen. That doesn't mean we don't need to change the zoning tomorrow. If we update the zoning ordinance, you could just say, for now, the zoning's good, but when we get the right project that comes in that makes sense, we can change the zoning then, but we have the plan as a guide to tell us that's the direction we wanted to head. So that would be the conversation with updating the zoning, is looking, you know, both at the text and the districts and the map. And then you can choose whether or not you want to proactively, you know, you want something to happen, or you know it's coming and you just want to get the zoning out of the way and change it now. You'll have that option when we get to the zoning. Or you can say, yeah, we can see it happening, but not quite yet. So we'll hold off and just leave the current zoning the way it is. We still have the future land use map, so we know the direction we're headed. And then when that thing comes along, we can change it. So you have options. It's not like a one-for-one, we do this and then that happens automatically.
Correct. All right, that's
Sarah,
the end.
thank you for the overview presentation of a rather comprehensive and thorough document, and thank you to Progressive for your efforts. I think at this time, I'll open up public hearing. This time, I'm opening the public hearing on the master plan update. I'd ask those that want to speak to raise their hand and then come to the podium and give us your name and your address and provide us your comments. Come forward, please.
My name is Beth Halchek, and my address is 8281 Harrington Ave, Belmont. I live directly across from the property that's between 131 and Harrington at 10 Mile there. You'll have to forgive me, I'm nervous and highly invested, so I'm not trying to be aggressive, but I do want to get my words out. I appreciate this group. I appreciate everything that you guys are doing and the time that you spend working towards a better Plainfield for all of us. But I'm concerned with the change to the property that we're discussing. I think that our neighborhood values the peace and quiet and the generally family dynamic that we have. We recently had the road commission come in and do a study, and the average speed that people actually travel on this road is between 35 and 40 miles an hour. It's not anywhere near the 55 miles an hour that is the legal limit right now. And they're gonna submit that for a change soon. I have concerns about the environmental impact that changing this property from a rural preserve to even a flexible industrial area might have. We all just recently went through the whole PFAS crisis, and I personally know that I was denied the retention of my well, even for agricultural uses, because there was concern that that might disrupt the water tables and spread the PFAS. And I question if paving over acres of land and changing the way rainwater falls there might have an impact on the spread of PFAS. I think that should be addressed. I also have concerns for my property value, being directly across the street from a business which could be retail oriented, would have a negative impact on my property value and the other values in that corridor, on that street. I do have an update to the petition that was generated. We're now up to 68 local families that have signed the petition to oppose the change away from having this be an rural preserve for the future land use. One of the comments was from a local family who said, "I absolutely do not want more commercially zoned land near my home. My property value has already been diminished because of what's been done to the land in the past. I moved here to get away from pollution and city crime. Studies prove that this type of development increases both. I will definitely consider moving to a different location altogether if the zoning is approved." I have concerns for safety too. I'm a single mom with 2 kids. Their bedroom has the windows directly on Harrington, and I wouldn't like to see any of the negative impact that business will have there. Increased light, increased traffic, increased human traffic has always increased crime. So just that alone concerns me. I would prefer to see it match the current state. I saw the 3 options that we have, but I think there is a 4th option, and the 4th option is to leave just the property that's right on 10 Mile, which is already a high-traffic commercial area, as an industrial use, and that does not extend nearly to where my property is on Harrington, or nearly as deeply as even the alternative options that were given to leave part of it the same and just change to flexible industrial on the northern part. That extends much further than the current C5 zoning extends. And I do understand the difference between future land use and zoning, but I think that we're possibly glossing over the fact that changing the future land use gives weight to the people who own that land now, who may want to sell it for a lot more than they can make in a residential sale, trying to get it rezoned. Because the first thing we would point to if they tried to rezone the land across the street from me to a commercial use would be, well, look, the future land use says that it's not supposed to be commercial. It's supposed to remain the way that it is right now. But if we do change the future land use, then my community loses that argument. If we do not change the future land use, we can still rezone it. There's just a little bit more of a barrier to keep a little bit more safety for my community and what we want to see happen there. Do you guys have any questions for me?
No, but if you could wrap up and summarize, I'd appreciate it. We normally limit to 3 minutes, the public comment, but
I'm sorry, it's my first time.
no, that's all right. We want to give you every opportunity, but on the other hand, if you can wrap it up, we'd appreciate that too.
Sure. I would really like to see it continue in some sort of residential use. And if that has to be duplexes because that's what the community needs right now, I certainly prefer that to a public area. If the new master plan passes with the future use as is, I hope that there would be conditions or protections for the properties already on Harrington. Like, for example, only one route into that commercial area off of 10 Mile rather than the traffic coming by the homes on our street. And maybe a noise, light, and safety barrier for the community that already exists there. So I thank you for your time, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Anybody else wishes? Yes. Name and address at the podium, please.
I'm Janice King, 8138 Harrington. I do understand the desire for some kind of flexible or commercial by the expressway interchange. That's kind of normal. What I don't understand is having the future land use go smack up against Harrington all the way down. It's a very hilly area. I don't know how that would fit in with the proposed use. There is some flat land up there, which might be amenable to that, but when you start getting into the hills, I have a very deep gully behind my house. And echoing what she said, you know, moving all that earth around to try to make it into an industrial park is going to stir up stuff we don't want to stir up and have that happen again. That said about, you know, the expressway interchange, it's understandable to have something there. But if it could be backed off of Harrington, so there's a buffer for the houses there, the community there, so there's a nice space that is kept residential and more country, that might be more palatable to other people. Is that, you know, like I said, the interchange by the expressway, understandable that you want travelers' business and that and whatnot off in that. But being it right up against Harrington, which is hilly, doesn't sound real easily done. And my concern with mine, I'm below a hill, I have a gully behind me, and if it gets, something around me gets changed to industrial, I will be taxed industrial, but nobody's gonna buy that for industrial because of the hills. Or, you know, I don't think it would. Yeah, I would just, if you were gonna do it, I would rather see a much smaller portion up against 10 Mile with a buffer, like she said, along Harrington.
Thank you. Yes. Again, name, address at the podium.
Hi, my name is Brenda Harris, and I live at 1601 House Street, Northeast in Belmont. We are on House Street, which Harrington turns into. The township, my husband and I, Paul, have lived there for 24 years, and so we've been longtime residents of the community. We have been one of the lucky residents to be affected by the PFAS contamination. And I think the township is fully aware of the situation that we've all endured and for several years. The dump site for Wolverine is right down the street from us. It also is adjacent to the property that's in question, just adjacent to that. The question that we have in our minds is water source. If we're talking development of a property, there has to be an adequate water source to supply water to a business type such as a hotel or car, you know, any type of business model that we're talking about here. And my understanding is that the municipal water to that particular area is probably to its limit, to its maximum capacity. We know for a fact that our general area was shut down from any access to well water sources. So my question would be, what is the intent of the Planning Commission to address water needs for this development plan in consideration of the contamination zone in which it sits? So I don't know if that's an appropriate thing to ask that question now, or if there's an answer time for that, or.
Staff will make note of your question. We
Very
don't
good.
answer questions, we're just receiving comment.
Okay, very
And they'll
good.
get you a response.
Okay, very good. I've not done this before either, so.
That's all right. Relax, take it easy.
So considering the underground well water source is not an option due to the contamination zone, we would ask the township to make that consideration. What is the water source? Not just short-term, but long-term. If we develop that property, how do we supply water to it safely because of its proximity to the contamination zone? C5 commercial zone, is my understanding, is where it was initially going to be rezoned, but perhaps that's already the current zoning, is that correct? It is currently C5, okay. If it is to be modified, our residents in the neighborhood, and I can pretty much speak for anyone on our street, would want to see this land preserved as a natural preserve or natural rural preserve, to prohibit commercial growth on that particular property for a variety of those reasons, the water source, but also for the impact to the community. We moved to Belmont 24 years ago because we loved this area. We loved the street. It was beautiful. It's not as beautiful as it used to be because of the development that's happening as a result of Wolverine's contamination. That entire 72-acre lot has been stripped. It's really changed the entire face of our neighborhood. And so to think that the other property adjacent to that, a little further down the road, would also be modified and developed and stripped of any natural, surroundings, would be devastating to our neighborhood. So we would just, we thank you for the work that you do, but we do ask that you would consider preserving this property as rural preserve, to keep it safe for the community and also just an enjoyable area for the community as well.
Thank you for your time. Anybody else? Again, name, address. Thank you.
I'm Sue Vanderplug. I live at 8200 Squirewood. I mostly came up here because everyone from Harrington was here, and I wanted you to know more people than just the Harrington people care about what's happening to that little corner, of course. And I just wanted to say, I guess my biggest point was, we moved there just 2 years ago, and we just thought, what a beautiful residential area. That's all. It'd be nice if it stayed that way. So, I know, nothing's forever, but man, we've only had 2 years of the deer and everything else, so. And I know people need housing, and I have no issue with like Eastbrook Homes, Autumn Hill, whatever, Autumn Trails. We went through, we had a lot there before we ended up buying on Squirewood. So I have no issue with the housing and stuff like that, but it sure would be nice to keep the residential character of the corner.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one else wishes, yes. You almost lost your opportunity.
No, I didn't wait too long. Bob Holman, 5836 Woodbriar Drive, Belmont. Two things, just two things. One is, I appreciate the fact that you've pointed out and recognized the importance of the floodplain and parks and recreation and open space. That's a generational problem that this is the only way to deal with it, and I appreciate that. The other thing is, I wonder, has the township had any conversation with Algoma Township? When I was the superintendent here, we had a 3-community kind of adjunct planning group that talked about how 10 Mile would be developed. A lot has changed since then. I mean, I remember when there was a bait store or a hunting store up there. Myers wasn't there, the water wasn't there, and look at it now. But people change, times change, circumstances changed. But I'm wondering if there's a mechanism, or it's been taken advantage of, to have a conversation with the Algoma Township Planning Commission and/or board. That's it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Going once, twice? Public hearing is closed. Thank you all for your time and effort. All right, at this time, we open it up for discussion with the Planning Commission members. We'll start with Brian.
I guess if we wanted to look at one of those other 3 options that were shown, how do we go about doing that?
We also could maybe it is a fourth option too, so maybe it's not one that ends up on.
I guess, yeah, if we want to look at other options, how do we, what is the best way to proceed with that?
I mean, just, I guess, a discussion between you folks on kind of the direction you're leaning. Yeah, there are these three main options. I think option 2 would probably that piece, those two pieces that are pink right now, would be still flex industrial. I don't think we're suggesting to go to mixed use there. I think it would be still flex industrial and the rest kept rural preserve. So it kind of, and that mixed use designation as it is now does have a heavy emphasis already on light industrial uses. So just kind of a nuance there. But yeah, I guess we're just kind of looking to get your input on this area after what you've heard. And we can chat through how to form a condition of approval if you think an amendment to the way it's currently drafted is appropriate.
Well, then, if, on option 2, so what we're really changing is on the west side of the highway, that larger portion stays as rural with the smaller mixed use.
No, and those two parcels, the larger and the smaller there, both with frontage on 10 Mile, we're recommending that that be flexible industrial.
Just to the west side of the highway, though?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Guess I'm a little confused on that. Can we? Well, I mean, if we don't know, go back down. I mean, this here.
Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. So the Harrington 10 Mile intersection, the only thing that we're recommending any changes to is the east portion of Harrington, west of the highway, east of Harrington. So what is west of Harrington? We're not recommending any zoning, any master plan changes. That's going to be residential. Correct, correct.
This shortens it up a little bit, is that correct? Okay, so it doesn't go as far south or all the way to the highway? Okay. Okay. Clarify what I was looking at.
Janelle?
Yeah, I guess I'm looking for a solution that protects the residential character along Harrington. So is it that the 10 area we're talking about, that's the controversial part on that, the option 2?
I'll give a little background, might help a little bit on that. The area up on the front, the C5 zoning has been there, I believe, for well over 20, 30 years. So back when we considered this many moons ago for flexible industrial, we wanted to get away from that commercial kind of intensity out there. But to take away some zoning rights like that, you have to have something similar. And light industrial at the time, or flex industrial now, gave us that authority, also gave us a lot more control. And then the other thing, just for the audience benefit, when we do light industrial, we require connection of sanitary sewer and public water. Public water is available there. They would have to connect to our system. Sanitary sewer is a distance away. Any person to develop that property has to pay for that on their dime.
So I'm asking, I like the new zoning category, which restricts more traffic. So the amount that's C5, I can see how that would benefit and protect the community as well if it went to the light industrial, because it would really keep the traffic from coming in and drive through and all of that. It's the other part that I'm wondering, south of that block.
How far south do we go?
Yeah,
C5 is just a minority, a very
Yeah.
small minority of that land you're talking about. It's not all of C5, right?
yeah.
The thing with C5 in those types of uses, you can put them, gas stations of that, on a much smaller piece. But if you're doing industrial, the scale that you need to bring utilities to make industrial work has to be a bit larger. In this case, that parcel is also largely, that area is largely held by one person
Okay.
on item 10, or where it shows that 10 there.
So that really gives the option too of, if there was a proposal for something, to really manage the details around that development to protect the community as well.
In the past, we've had Pro Bass Shop and other places like that looking to come in for big boxes, and we're looking to protect ourselves from those types of uses also.
Just as kind of an option as well, if you did want to craft some language with special protections for the existing neighbors on Harrington, you could make a recommendation that maybe it stays flexible industrial, but written into the master plan, a special call out, with increased landscape buffers and things like that. So there's some language we can add to the master plan as well, if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that would be important to do in order to make sure that the other side of the street is protected.
There's a condition almost identical to this on Maryland, and as it comes off of Leonard towards 96. There's some light industrial there. There's a technology firm in there that's got a very large space. There's a couple shops, luggage repair, health, and whatnot. And it's directly adjacent to a much more densely populated area in Grand Rapids. And those two coexist extremely well. It's with the restrictions placed by light industrial, it's not stamping metal. It is maker spaces, small companies that are running CNC machines. It's carpentry. It's a whole bunch of other things that is not commercial restaurant with all of the cars coming in and out. It's much more of a laid-back type of application, as it is in Grand Rapids, than I think what we're conceiving. I think that option 3, if we code that in as a requirement, recognizing the residential that's already there, and then putting some light industrial above that, I think that would be a good, not a compromise, it would be a good enhancement.
Dennis?
Just for clarity, with the public water, all projects have to go through the township engineer to make sure there's adequate water, and all that stuff has been pre-studied if something's going to be placed in a location.
Yep, correct.
Okay. Second of all, if a project were to go in there, a possible stipulation could be maybe extended front yard setbacks, interconnectedness of that new zone, so it seems on its face to be geographically separate from a residential area. That would be my suggestion.
Just going to go back on your first question a little bit. We have met with Algoma Township in terms of utility planning, and that stuff, that work has been done out there. They are aware. Everything I want to bring to your attention is not really been talked about, but this is still in the 10-mile overlay that we work with Algoma on. It extends to Harrington, and it ends there, if I recall correctly. So there is a dialogue going back and forth between it, and there are some additional protections built into the overlay, primarily is related to 10-mile, not adjacent to Harrington. But we have created some study area, sub-areas like that, where we can put in protective language for when somebody comes in to do something with a property. It gives us a guideline when they come in, because more than likely somebody'd have to develop this as a planned unit development. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. That's all I had.
I believe in the long term that the flexible industrial classification is more friendly to the neighborhood than what we currently have with the C5 zoning along 10 Mile. The question is, how far do we extend to the south that classification? And I don't, you know, where does it start to have a disbenefit to keep it shorter than longer? Which gets me leaning towards option 3. That's where I'm on this, and if I had to vote, I'd vote for option 3. We don't interact with, once the public hearing is done, we don't interact with the audience, okay?
I think if that was the direction, you would still need protection north of that block in terms of some language just recognizing the
Oh, yeah.
residential character of the neighborhood.
That's when you start getting into specifics of the zoning ordinance
Yeah.
and how do you balance that industrial, flexible industrial with the residential area around it. And I think since I've been on the planning commission, we've made strides to try to do that with every development we've dealt with. Now, you can write something into option 3 in terms of attempting to preserve the character in that area and calling that area out specifically because I believe we have other inflexible industrial zones within the township. And this one's being called out as something special. So I guess how do we proceed with a motion to forward a favorable recommendation to the township board?
So let's take a look at the motion. So I think just under, if you're inclined to recommend approval or to approve it, then I think this motion and then a condition added saying, I think just referencing option 3, if that's the consensus, with special consideration added for residential buffering. I think we have a good idea of kind of what you're saying, and before the township board meeting, Progressive AE can do a little more work on adding that language. So I think if that's what you're comfortable with, that would be an appropriate motion. Any additional comments from Progressive on that?
The way that we would handle is in the future land use section for flexible industrial, and there would be a call out that specifically identifies this area and talk about the sensitivity of residential uses across the street. In particular, the need for access management.
Mm-hmm.
The drive should be as far north as possible and contiguous drive so that we don't have lots of curb cuts happening along Harrington, and then buffering and screening to protect the area. I think also it might be good, we have that line there. I think we also want to just double check with the topography. Look at the topo map and make sure, certainly that first parcel, that's, the large parcel makes sense. But further to the south, let's look at the topography just to make sure that given the public comment that it would make sense for it even to be developed in that way. But we can look at that, but if we're good with that, then we'll just respect that line on the option 3.
Well, as we know with plans, this will be up for review again in 5 to 10 years. In addition, this is kind of I think a long-term C, and even if we draw a line on wherever that line is on the south side, when it comes time to rezone it, then you can have another discussion about that and the buffering and.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I think the tricky thing with future land use is, and we usually write that in there, is it's not always a bright line as like this property. If it's the property, give or take a parcel, I mean, it depends on what the
Right.
request is and as you're looking it through. So you don't have to proactively rezone it now. This is one of those ones where you would keep it residential until you get a request. But I would recommend, certainly when we get into the zoning, that frontage along 10 Mile, changing that sooner than later so it does protect the neighbors, because I think you are right that the flexible industrial does a better job of that than what the current zoning does.
Yeah, yeah. Now and into the future. Okay, someone want to take a stab at a motion?
I move to approve the resolution for the master plan update, to approve the draft master plan using option 3, the flexible industrial to the north, rural preserve to the south, paying attention to buffering for neighbors across Harrington, and also the exact line that they use based on topography. And we forward a favorable recommendation based on those criteria.
I second.
Motion support. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. All right, staff comments.
I have no comments. You, Elizabeth?
I have no comments. It's nice to see Janelle. It's my first meeting with Janelle, so. That's all,
All
thanks.
right, commissioners. Janelle, anything else?
I don't think so.
Brian?
Elizabeth, did anything come of the picture I sent you from my favorite person to
Yes,
talk
yes,
about?
so I
Unfortunately?
forwarded that to our enforcement team.
Okay.
Because I'm clearly not effective at getting in compliance on that site. So the sheriff actually went out there and has been in communication with the property owner. So
Okay.
I will double check on where that's at for you.
Okay, just seems it was getting worse and worse. So.
Yeah.
Propane lane again, just for anybody who's wondering.
Dennis?
I have no comments.
Anything else? Robin?
Yeah, I want to voice appreciation for that communication about the decision that we made at Jupiter and West River Drive. It's very much appreciated.
Yeah, nice to get that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
And I'll wrap things up by saying thank you to Progressive and the staff for your comprehensive effort on this master plan, due diligence, and working it through and dealing with commissioners. And thank you for your efforts. And at this time, I adjourn the meeting.
Thank you for taking time.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thanks for bringing it up.
You know, the guy that gave us that email.
Yeah, really.